Hey guys, if you like my videos, please like and subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it, thanks. And also let me know where y'all are watching from and at what time. I'm curious. In 30 years as a detective, I've seen things most people wouldn't believe. Things you won't find written in any official report. I've stared straight into the darkest corners of this city, dealt with crimes that defy reason, and learned the hard way that the line separating our world from something else entirely is thinner than anyone suspects. Most cases eventually blur together, but a few haunt you forever, especially the ones that cost you personally, the ones that remind you the dead don't always stay buried. This is one of those cases. The worst nightmares don't show up at midnight. They arrive on ordinary Tuesday mornings, sipping stale coffee at a cluttered detective's desk. Trust me on this, I know from experience. My name's Detective Sam Harlow, and this nightmare started with a plain white envelope. It sat on my desk like a small pale intruder nestled among unpaid bills, untouched reports, and a cold breakfast sandwich. No return address, no stamps, just my name written in neat, careful penmanship, ink crisp as a funeral suit. It was the sort of letter that left fingerprints on your soul. I cracked it open, expecting trouble. A nasty note from some perp I'd sent upstate, maybe. But what I got was worse. The letter inside described a murder in meticulous, bone-chilling detail. Street names, victim's name, even the color of the victim's shoelaces, all laid out calmly like a chef sharing a prized recipe. Only problem was, it hadn't happened yet. I leaned back in my squeaky chair, scanning the page again, half expecting the ink to vanish, the words to rearrange themselves. My stomach clenched when they didn't. A dull ache settled between my eyes, an old friend signaling trouble ahead. "You all right, Sam?" Detective Jake Carter asked, leaning over the partition that separated our desks. Jake was a good detective. Sharp instincts, sharp pursuits. We'd been partners once before promotion shuffled us to separate cases, but our friendship endured, casual banter stitched together by too many late nights and bad pizza. "Not sure yet," I murmured, passing him the letter. "Tell me this is someone's twisted idea of a joke." Jake scanned the page, expression hardening. "This is detailed, too detailed." My thoughts exactly. I drained my coffee, wishing it was stronger. "Check missing persons. See if anyone matches that description. And Jake?" He looked back, eyebrow raised. "Do it quietly." An hour later, the call came in. A young woman's body discovered behind a laundromat on 5th, just as the letter described. Jake and I arrived to flashing blue lights and grim-faced officers setting up tape. The crime scene was a stark match to every nauseating detail spelled out in that cursed letter. Right down to the position of the body, the shoelaces knotted in a figure 8, and the victim's pale skin turned blue beneath an October chill. "Someone's playing with us," Jake growled, breath clouding in the early morning air. I knelt beside the body, careful not to disturb evidence. Something about the precise staging twisted my guts. I'd seen this before, years ago, in the bloody work of a man who couldn't possibly have done it. "Not playing," I said quietly. "Haunting." "Sam," Jake said, concern edging his voice. "This looks exactly like—" "Yeah," I interrupted, heart heavy with memories. "Daniel Kane. But he's dead." I stood, folding the letter carefully back into my coat pocket. The paper felt cold, heavier now. Executed months ago, and yet someone just copied his kill, note for note. Or worse, I thought bitterly. Somehow, impossibly, Kane was reaching out from beyond the grave. Handwriting is like fingerprints, unique to the person leaving it behind. Or so they tell you in detective school. If that was true, then the letter burning a hole in my pocket was either an impossibility or a nightmare with a return address straight from hell. Jake and I stood quietly as the forensics team processed the scene. Crime scenes all share a language, spoken in yellow tape and camera flashes, but this one screamed familiarity, a chilling echo from a case I thought was closed forever. Back at the precinct, I spread out Daniel Kane's old case files on my desk, feeling every second ticking by like drops of ice water down my spine. I flipped through gruesome crime scene photographs, each victim arranged in that twisted, clinical perfection Kane was known for. "I don't like this," Jake muttered, looking over my shoulder. His tone was taut, his usual relaxed confidence strained at the edges. These details weren't in the press. Only the detectives on the original case knew, I confirmed, and Kane himself. I couldn't stop staring at the handwriting. the strokes familiar as an unwanted guest. Forensic handwriting analyst Ellie Baxter met us in her lab, neon lights washing over the room like a cold dawn. Ellie was exacting, meticulous, and not one for fanciful theories. "Detective Harlow," Ellie greeted me with a clinical nod. She glanced at Jake. "Carter." I handed her both letters, Kane's original threat from months ago, and the letter that had arrived that morning. She slipped gloves on, laid the letters side by side beneath a glaring magnifying glass, and scrutinized them quietly. "Please tell me I'm imagining things," I said, more hopeful than certain. She looked up slowly, lips pressed into a thin, unhappy line. "You're not. This handwriting isn't just similar, it's identical, stroke for stroke, slant, spacing, pressure. It's an exact match. Handwriting this precise, it can't be copied by even the best forger." Jake's voice turned sharp with disbelief. "But Kane's been dead for months." Ellie nodded grimly. "Handwriting's as unique as DNA. This isn't someone copying his style. It's him, or someone who's him, right down to the muscle memory. Impossible or not, this letter's genuine." I felt my pulse quicken, the dread thickening. "What exactly are we dealing with here?" Ellie frowned, pushing back her glasses. "Science can't answer that, Detective. This isn't just mimicry. Whoever wrote this, it's as if Daniel Kane's hands wrote it themselves." My stomach twisted. Suddenly, the sterile room felt suffocating. Ellie's words lingered like smoke after a fire, impossible to ignore. "Who else had access to Kane's files?" Jake asked quietly, voice strained. "Anyone else at the precinct?" "Too many," I admitted. "But the detail here, that's not just access, that's Kane's mind." "Then we're chasing a ghost," Jake said bitterly. "No," I corrected, heart sinking. "Ghosts don't send letters." As we left the lab, the letter felt heavier, colder, like a silent promise of horrors still waiting in the shadows. "There are two kinds of mysteries detectives dread, those you can't solve and those that shouldn't exist in the first place." This one was shaping up to be both. Back at my desk, I sorted through Daniel Kane's old case files, pages yellowed at the edges, ink faded by time, but still as damning as ever. His murders had been meticulous, cruel, arranged like twisted art installations. The recent killings matched them exactly, down to details no one outside a handful of detectives could possibly know. Jake paced nearby, tension radiating off him like a storm cloud. "Who else knew the specifics, Sam?" "Me, you, Captain Reynolds, maybe the prosecutor, and Ellie Baxter," I replied, running my fingers through my hair. "And Kane himself." "So, a copycat?" Jake suggested weakly. "If it's a copycat, they're supernatural," I said dryly. "Those letters don't just match Kane's style, they match his handwriting exactly. Muscle memory, Jake. You heard Ellie?" Jake exhaled sharply, frustration etched into his face. "What about family? Kane had a sister, didn't he?" "Died 6 years ago," I answered. "Checked her file myself when he was executed." Jake cursed softly under his breath, turning away toward the window. The city skyline loomed beyond, lights glittering mockingly, oblivious to our impossible case. I leaned back, fatigue tugging at the edges of my consciousness. My phone buzzed. A new text from Ellie. She'd double-checked the letters again. The message was simple, blunt, and final. "No forgery. Matches Kane's handwriting exactly. Can't explain it. I'm sorry, Sam." That was Ellie, concise, reliable, and frustratingly scientific. When she said something was impossible, she meant it. And if Ellie had hit a dead end, that left us with fewer options, and darker possibilities. Before I could gather my thoughts, the precinct mail courier approached my desk, visibly nervous. "Detective Harlow, another one for you." My stomach twisted. He handed me the envelope with a trembling hand, eyes darting away. Clearly, he'd already heard the whispers. I tore open the letter without hesitation, the handwriting again, precise, tauntingly familiar. My pulse quickened as I read the message aloud. "You should have buried me deeper, Sam. The next one will be closer to home." Jake was watching, pale-faced. "He's escalating, taunting you." "No," I corrected quietly. "He's proving he's still here. The detail, the handwriting, the knowledge, it's all him." "You really believe Kane came back from the dead?" Jake asked, voice strained. I shook my head slowly. "I don't know what I believe anymore, but this isn't just a copycat, Jake. This feels personal, like he never left." Jake looked away, fear flashing in his eyes. If it is Kane, then how is he doing this? I didn't answer. Truth was, I didn't know. But as I held that impossible letter, I realized it didn't matter what I believed. Daniel Kane wasn't finished, and neither was this nightmare. When logic fails, instinct steps in. And right now my gut was shouting that we'd missed something crucial, hidden in plain sight. So I retreated to the precinct archives, hoping answers lay buried among dusty boxes and forgotten files. I pulled the old evidence box labeled Daniel Kane from storage. Inside was a pile of transcripts, photographs, and cassette tapes sealed neatly in plastic. I selected one labeled Interrogation Final Session. The tape clicked into place. Headphones settled over my ears, muffling the ambient noise of the precinct. Daniel Kane's voice crawled into my head, smooth and unsettling, like oil slicking across water. "You think killing me stops this?" Kane purred, voice dripping with cruel amusement. "Death isn't the end, detective, it's the beginning." I'd heard this before, of course. At the time, I dismissed it as the ravings of a lunatic desperate to get one last rise out of me. But now, hearing Kane speak again felt uncomfortably like a personal visit from beyond the grave. I paused, rewound, and listened again, searching for meaning. Then, on impulse, I slowed the playback speed. Kane's voice distorted, deepened, words stretching out strangely, and beneath the distorted rasp came a second sound, faint yet unmistakably real, a voice beneath Kane's own, clearer now, distinct. My blood ran cold as I realized what it said. Sam Harlow. I ripped off the headphones, heart hammering painfully in my chest. Had that always been there? Impossible. I'd listened to this tape countless times before the trial. It was evidence. We'd combed through every second of it. How had we missed that? Heart hammering, I glanced around the precinct, suddenly feeling eyes on me. Everything appeared normal. Phones ringing, officers chatting, computers humming softly. But normal felt distant, foreign. My reality was cracking apart. Jake stopped beside my desk, carrying 2 steaming coffee cups. He frowned at my expression. "You all right, man? You look like you just saw a ghost." "Close enough," I thought grimly. "Listen to this," I said, handing him the headphones. Jake put them on skeptically, pressed play. His casual expression faltered, face paling noticeably. When he pulled off the headphones, he swallowed hard, voice unsteady. "Was that always there?" "No," I answered grimly. "That's new." Jake shook his head slowly, voice quiet with disbelief. "Sam, that tape's been locked up for months. No one could have changed it." "I know." My voice felt raw. "But something's changing. Someone or something is trying to communicate." Jake's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "You think Kane is, what, haunting us?" "I think we underestimated him." I carefully removed the tape, my hand steady despite the cold knot in my chest. "We thought death would silence him, but it's given him a voice. And now, it seemed, Daniel Kane had chosen me personally as his audience. The trouble with knowing the impossible is real, convincing anyone else you haven't lost your mind." The precinct buzzed around me, familiar routines now hollow, meaningless background noise. Detectives shouted across desks, phones rang, and somewhere an argument flared about who took the last donut. Normally comforting sounds, now they were distorted echoes in a waking nightmare. I kept glancing at Jake. We'd been partners long enough to finish each other's sentences, to anticipate movements. But lately Jake was off script, tense, withdrawn. He haunted the precinct at odd hours, coming in before sunrise, staying late after everyone had left. His cheerful sarcasm had given way to flat, humorless observations. "Jake," I said cautiously, approaching his desk late one evening, "you've been pulling long hours lately." Jake's eyes flicked up, and for a heartbeat something cold flashed in them, something alien. He covered quickly with a thin smile, forced and uncomfortable. "Murders don't wait for regular business hours, Sam. Thought you knew that." "I do," I agreed, watching him carefully. "But you've been different lately, distracted." He laughed, short and harsh, a humorless bark. "You're imagining things. Maybe." My eyes drifted to his desk, to something crumpled under a stack of papers, a coffee-stained napkin, covered in handwriting I'd know anywhere. Daniel Kane's handwriting. "What's that?" Jake's eyes hardened, gaze narrowing sharply. "Nothing." I reached over casually, plucking the napkin from beneath his fingers before he could react. Jake tensed, muscles coiled, a dangerous edge I'd never seen directed at me. I unfolded it slowly, my throat tightening as I recognized Kane's flowing script, ink smeared slightly, fresh and dark. "Care to explain?" I asked, voice brittle with suspicion. Jake's face twisted with confusion, genuine panic flickering behind his eyes. For a second he looked lost, terrified even. I don't know, Sam, I don't remember writing that." I believed him. God help me, I believed him. But belief wasn't enough anymore. There was something else at play, something darker than memory lapses. Later, in the quiet corner of a dimly lit library, I scoured books I'd never thought I'd open, tomes about spirits, possessions, and hauntings. My skepticism fought every word on every yellowed page, but Daniel Kane had never been ordinary. He'd promised death wasn't the end, and now I had no choice but to believe it. A passage stopped me cold. A vengeful spirit can anchor itself to the living, those familiar, vulnerable, emotionally connected. Signs of possession include lost time, shifts in personality, handwriting changes. My blood froze. Jake fit every symptom. Daniel Kane wasn't back as a ghost rattling chains. He was writing Jake Carter, puppeteering him like a marionette. My heart sank. It wasn't a matter of catching Kane's ghost. It was figuring out how to save my friend, or if I'd already lost him forever. I'd never been good at walking away from a fight, especially not when my friend was in trouble. But how do you fight something you can't shoot, can't cuff, can't even prove exists? Kane was playing a game with rules I didn't understand, and Jake was the board he'd chosen. Late one night, beneath the dim buzz of the precinct's failing fluorescence, I shadowed Jake quietly toward the locker room. He moved mechanically, footsteps heavy, as if he carried more weight than he should. I followed, breath held, slipping silently into shadows as he pushed the door open. Inside, Jake stood before the mirrors, head bowed slightly, muttering quietly. From my angle in the doorway, I could see his reflection clearly in the mirror, and it wasn't right. The reflection moved a heartbeat behind Jake, subtly out of sync. When Jake reached up to rub his tired eyes, the reflection smiled coldly back at him. Ice filled my chest. "Jake," I called, voice louder than intended. He stiffened, shoulders rigid. "What do you want, Sam?" Jake asked softly, not turning around. "Answers," I replied, stepping forward. "Who are you?" Jake's shoulders shook slightly, a silent laugh. He turned slowly, eyes darker than I remembered, holding none of the warmth I'd grown to trust over the years. "You already know," he said, and the cold certainty in his voice belonged to another man, a dead one. "Kane," I whispered. Jake's grin widened, his expression hardening into something smug, mocking. "It took you long enough, you're getting rusty." "Let him go," I demanded, jaw tight, anger masking the fear crawling up my spine. "Whatever this is, let Jake go. It's me you want, right?" He chuckled softly, stepping closer. His movements were Jake's, but twisted, dangerously graceful in a way Jake never was. "You're smarter than this. Death is nothing. It's a doorway, not a wall. Jake's been kind enough to hold the door open." My fist tightened, frustration boiling. "You can't keep him." "Oh, Sam," he sighed, amusement flickering through eyes now so alien. "Who says I want him permanently? I'm just borrowing him long enough to prove a point." "What point?" I snapped. "That you never beat me," Kane replied evenly. "That death couldn't stop me. You failed, detective. And now I'll remind you why." He turned slowly toward the locker room mirror, staring at his warped reflection with fascination. My friend's haunted face stared blankly back, features drained of hope, lost and fading beneath Kane's predatory smirk. "Jake," I whispered desperately, "fight him." For one fleeting instant I saw Jake's eyes clear, flickering with recognition and anguish. Then the darkness flooded back, and Kane's mocking laughter filled the silence between us. If there's one thing worse than realizing a ghost has taken up residence in your friend's body, it's seeing the ghost stare right back at you with your friend's eyes. Daniel Kane had died months ago, dead by execution, dead by justice's measure, but death hadn't stuck. Jake Carter stood inches from me, his smile cold, his eyes strangely bright. I watched him warily, pulse hammering in my ears. "You can't stay in there," I said, hating how unsteady my voice sounded. "Jake won't let you." The thing inside Jake laughed softly, chillingly. "Jake's fighting, detective. You should hear him screaming, but he's not strong enough. Not nearly strong enough. How is this possible? I demanded. It was always going to be like this. He smiled, pacing around me slowly, circling like a predator, sizing up prey. Death's just a doorway, Detective, for some of us anyway. My hand hovered near my service weapon, but hesitation paralyzed me. How could I point a gun at the man I'd trusted for years? How could I shoot when there was still a chance to get him back? You killed innocent people, I spat, clenching my fists. What twisted point are you trying to make? Jake, or rather Kane, smirked, stepping closer. No one's truly innocent, Sam. You know that better than most. I flinched. Daniel Kane's mocking philosophy coming from Jake's mouth was worse than any blow could have been. Anger boiled beneath my fear. Jake, if you're still in there, fight him. Don't let him control you. Jake's eyes shifted briefly, a ripple across still water. Desperation flickered for a heartbeat. Sam, please. Then Kane's voice surged back, drowning Jake's plea beneath an ocean of darkness. He's fading. Soon it'll be just me. Get out of him, I growled. Or what? Kane sneered. You'll shoot me? That might kill the vessel, Sam, but I'll still be here. Forever, maybe. He took a step closer, forcing me to confront the impossible choice. My hand trembled near the gun. I'd faced killers, sociopaths, maniacs, but none of them had worn my friend's face. What do you want? I demanded bitterly. Revenge? Satisfaction? Kane tilted Jake's head, considering. Maybe just entertainment, or maybe something bigger, something you'll understand very soon. He stepped away smoothly, turning toward the precinct doors. I'll let Jake rest for now, but remember, Detective, this is far from finished, and the next letter I write might be yours. I watched helplessly as he walked away, back straight, steps confident, a stranger inside the body of my friend, a monster wearing the mask of a good man. Somehow I had to stop Kane before he destroyed more than Jake's soul, before he destroyed mine, too. Sleep was supposed to be my refuge. It was supposed to be the one place Daniel Kane couldn't follow. I was wrong. That night, exhaustion overtook me, pulling me down into a sleep heavy with dread. Dreams came quickly, tumbling me into shadows that clawed at the edges of sanity. Reality blurred, softening into the familiar yet alien landscape of nightmares. I found myself bound tightly to a worn wooden chair in a place I vaguely recognized, an old interrogation room, its peeling walls stained with years of cigarettes and regret. A solitary bulb hung above, flickering weakly like a dying heartbeat. Across from me, Daniel Kane sat casually, his smile cool and certain. He held a pen in one pale hand, tracing careful words onto paper with ink the color of midnight rust. No, not ink. Blood. You don't understand, Detective, he said conversationally, dipping his fingers into a pool of crimson beside him. I warned you, death is only the beginning. Kane, I growled, fighting against my bonds. You're dead. I saw them put you down. He smiled faintly, holding up the blood-soaked page for my inspection. My name stood stark and accusing across the page, letters glistening wetly. Death opened the door wider. It didn't lock it. I strained harder, muscles burning against the unyielding restraints. This isn't real. You're not here. Denial, he said calmly, is comforting. But you know better, Sam. I chose Jake because he trusts you, because it hurts you to see him fall. The greatest pain isn't losing your own life. It's losing the ones you couldn't protect. He approached me slowly, eyes hollow yet burning with malevolent satisfaction. Blood dripped lazily from his fingertips. Kane's dead gaze penetrated deep into me, crawling into hidden, frightened places I'd thought buried long ago. You're next, he whispered, fingers grazing my face, leaving warm streaks of blood on my cheek. But first you'll watch everyone you care about suffer. I jolted awake, gasping desperately for air, tangled in sweat-dampened sheets. The room was dark, quiet, untouched. The nightmare lingered heavily, a ghostly presence in the shadows. Except it wasn't a dream. Something crinkled against my chest. My heart seized as I reached for the paper, fingers trembling. Slowly, I unfolded it, pulse hammering as I read words scrawled in Kane's familiar script. You're next, Sam. Sleep well. My apartment was locked tight, every door secured, every window latched from the inside. No forced entry, no footprints, just Kane's letter, delivered straight from my nightmare to reality. He had warned me clearly enough. Death wasn't the end, and Daniel Kane's vengeance had crossed from dreams into my waking life. I sat alone in the dark, unable to shake the feeling that Kane was closer now than ever, whispering promises of horrors still to come. In police work, trust matters more than Kevlar or firearms. It's the bond that makes everything else bearable. But what do you do when the partner you've trusted with your life becomes something monstrous, something impossible? The precinct buzzed nervously, an undercurrent of unease palpable in every corridor. Daniel Kane's name circulated in hushed tones, always followed by anxious glances toward Jake's empty chair. Jake himself had become scarce, showing up just enough to make his absence feel intentional. He started losing time, hours and sometimes entire days. Yet, impossibly, he was always the first detective to reach each new crime scene. I'd seen Jake working under pressure before, but never with this cold efficiency, this ruthless precision. His easygoing personality faded with each passing day, replaced by Kane's methodical, clinical cruelty. At first, his slip-ups were subtle. A word here, a gesture there. But soon it became obvious. Jake's voice was changing, deepening into Kane's clipped tones. He moved differently, a predatory grace replacing Jake's casual stride. Then came the handwriting. Reports submitted by Jake were now penned flawlessly, in Kane's flowing script. Even his notes scrawled hastily on post-its were indistinguishable from Kane's letters. Every careful loop, every precise stroke was identical. "Hey, Carter," Officer Mason joked uneasily as Jake scribbled down a note at the precinct coffee machine. "You sound exactly like Kane lately. Spooky, man." Jake laughed softly, a dry, mirthless chuckle that froze everyone nearby. The laugh belonged to Kane, echoing coldly down the hallway. Jake turned slowly, eyes oddly bright. "Funny how these things happen," he murmured softly, flashing a chilling smile. The officers around him fell silent, instinctively recoiling as if sensing danger. He caught my gaze, and something dark flashed briefly in his expression. Recognition? Defiance? It didn't matter. Something had shifted permanently in Jake's eyes. Kane wasn't just a passenger anymore. He had full control. Later, I cornered Jake outside the precinct, shadowed beneath the amber glow of streetlights. "Jake, you have to stop fighting me. I can help you." He regarded me quietly, his expression unreadable. "Sam, Jake isn't here right now. Fight back," I demanded, desperation coloring my voice. "He hasn't won yet." "You misunderstand," he replied softly. "Jake's tired, Detective. Too weak to fight anymore." "I'm not losing you," I insisted, voice hoarse with strain. "Kane won't win." He smiled sadly, the expression twisted into something sinister beneath familiar features. "Kane's not the visitor anymore. I am." With those chilling words, he vanished into the darkness, leaving me alone with dread pooling coldly in my chest. Whatever line separated Jake Carter and Daniel Kane had dissolved. The transformation was complete, and I was running out of time to save my friend or myself. Watching a friend slowly lose himself is worse than facing any monster. It steals pieces of you, leaving guilt where certainty used to live, replacing trust with doubt. Every moment Jake was out of my sight felt like another piece of him sliding away forever. Jake's absences grew longer, and his appearances felt more like cruel teases, brief glimpses of the man he used to be before the darkness reclaimed him. When he did return, he moved through the precinct silently, a ghost in plain sight, and detectives began quietly steering clear. Even hardened cops sense trouble, especially when it wears a familiar face. Captain Reynolds called me into his office one evening, closing the door quietly behind me. His expression was weary, resigned. "Sam, we've got a problem." "Jake," I said, already knowing. The captain sighed deeply, sitting heavily behind his desk. "Jake's behavior, these murders, people are noticing. They're starting to talk." "You think Jake's responsible?" "I think we can't ignore the possibility, not anymore." Reynolds eyed me carefully. "Have you confronted him?" "Yeah, but he's not himself." I hesitated, hating how weak that sounded. "Something else is in control." The captain's face softened with pity, skepticism plain. "Sam, you've been under stress." "Don't," I snapped, fighting down frustration. "I'm not losing my mind. Jake Carter is possessed. I've seen it." Reynolds shook his head, expression grave. You sound insane, Sam. Even if I believed you, who else would? Possession? Ghosts? We deal in evidence, not nightmares. I'll find your evidence, I said coldly, turning to leave. But Jake isn't the monster, he's just trapped inside one. Outside, the night air chilled me to the bone. Jake stood near the precinct parking lot, leaning against his car, cigarette dangling casually between his fingers. He stared at the building, a predator sizing up its prey. His eyes glittered strangely in the lamplight. Evening, detective, he said casually. I stiffened. Kane. His lips curved, expression mocking. It's refreshing, isn't it? Finally dropping pretenses. Why Jake? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. He was close, Kane said simply. Convenient, trusted, useful. He already knew your weaknesses. He won't let you keep him, I growled. Kane's eyes darkened, stepping closer. Sam, Jake isn't fighting anymore. He gave up. You should too. Never. His smile widened slowly, cruelly. Then watch closely, because what comes next? You'll wish you'd stopped me when you had the chance. With that chilling promise, he flicked his cigarette into the darkness and disappeared. I stood alone, heart racing, shadows deepening around me. The thing about darkness, it doesn't announce itself. It settles quietly, slowly replacing familiarity until one day you wake up surrounded by something you no longer recognize. Jake Carter was gone. The man standing in front of me now, eyes cold as winter steel, was Daniel Kane. He'd shed every pretense, fully comfortable wearing Jake's face like a borrowed coat. I'd set up the sting meticulously. I had planted fake news at the precinct that the next murder would happen at an abandoned warehouse, according to a new letter I had gotten. Having studied Kane before his capture and death, I knew his ego wouldn't be able to tolerate a copycat taking credit for his great work. Knowing he would be caught, he still brought his next victim here. So here we stood, beneath the pale glow of rusted floodlights illuminating broken concrete. Kane standing over his unknown victim with literal blood on his hands. You made a mistake, Kane, I said, my voice tight with bitter triumph. He glanced around casually, unfazed. Did I? Officers moved cautiously into position, guns drawn. Blue and red lights flashed silently in the distance, turning shadows into something sinister. Jake raised his hands almost lazily, unconcerned, like he had nothing left to lose. You can't shoot me, Sam, Kane said, eyes glittering. If you could, you already would have. My finger tightened on the trigger, my chest tight with anguish. Jake was still somewhere inside there. He had to be. Killing Kane meant killing Jake, too, a choice I couldn't make. Jake, I pleaded desperately, fight this. You're stronger than him. Kane laughed bitterly. You really think he can hear you? Jake's been gone for a while. He let go the moment he realized you couldn't save him. You're lying, I said, fighting the sick dread climbing my spine. Maybe, Kane replied coldly. But it won't matter. Jake's just a host, a temporary doorway. You can't kill me any more than you can shoot your shadow. Why me? I demanded, voice cracking with frustration. Why come back now? Kane's expression hardened, voice dropping low and harsh. Because death is lonely, detective. I wanted you to understand true isolation, watching helplessly while everything you care about burns. My grip wavered, my gun shook in my hands, the weight unbearable. You'll slip, I warned weakly. I'll catch you again. He smiled, amused. You still don't understand. This isn't a battle you can win. The war was over the moment I stepped back through the door. He glanced skyward, eyes darkening ominously. It's beautiful, isn't it, Sam? How easily life and death blend together. He turned slowly, raising his hands to the waiting officers. Go ahead, arrest me. You'll learn soon enough. As the cuffs snapped shut on Jake's wrists, Kane looked back, eyes glittering with dark amusement. This isn't the end. It never will be. He smiled coldly, and dread settled in my bones, because I knew deeply, horribly, he was telling the truth. Cells aren't meant to hold the dead, not even when the dead wear familiar faces. Jake Carter, Daniel Kane, sat quietly on the bunk, watching me approach with cold eyes, hands folded neatly in his lap. It was a peaceful posture, yet it radiated menace like heat from glowing embers. You shouldn't be here, I said, voice low, tired from sleepless nights and haunted dreams. Kane smiled calmly, Jake's features stretched into something eerie, something dangerously patient. Yet here we are, Sam. It seems we're both trapped. I'll find a way to get Jake back, I promised fiercely, clenching fists at my sides. He tilted his head curiously. Jake's gone, Sam. The moment you hesitate, you lose. You taught me that. Something flickered behind those cold eyes. Anguish or defiance, I couldn't be sure. My heart lurched, desperate to believe Jake was still in there, fighting beneath Kane's malevolent presence. Kane, I growled softly, leaning close to the bars. You lost before. You'll lose again. His lips twitched faintly, eyes gleaming with amusement. You still don't get it, Detective. I can't lose. Even if you lock me away forever, even if Jake dies, there's always another door, another willing host. Not if I stop you first. He shook his head slowly, pityingly. You can't stop me. All you can do is watch. That night, sleep avoided me. Darkness pressed close, hours stretching endlessly. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Kane's smug face, heard his cold laughter echoing endlessly inside my mind. I'd arrested Jake, locked him away, but the threat felt far from neutralized. Before sunrise, my phone rang, breaking the fragile silence. Captain Reynolds' voice sounded strained, heavy with dread. Sam, get down here. Something happened to Jake. I raced to the precinct, heart pounding painfully. Officers stood huddled around the holding cell, faces grim. Reynolds met my gaze silently, nodding toward the cell. Jake was slumped against the wall, eyes wide and unfocused, hands coated red. Blood dripped from his fingers, pooling in a grisly puddle beneath him. Words sprawled across the wall behind him, scrawled crudely in Jake's own blood. My stomach turned cold as I read, You will never be rid of me, Detective. I'll always find a way back. Jake stared up at me, desperate eyes briefly his own. Sam, please, you have to end this. I'll get you help, I whispered brokenly. No, Jake breathed painfully, voice shuddering. You don't understand. He'll never leave. He'll never. His voice choked off suddenly. His body trembled violently, spine arching painfully backward. The eyes that looked back were no longer Jake's. Kane's twisted grin returned, triumphant beneath Jake's tortured face. The guards rushed forward, pulling Jake from the cell, medics scrambling as his body convulsed. But I knew already. This wasn't medical, it was spiritual warfare. And we were losing. As they took him away, Kane's voice lingered behind, soft and mocking. Remember, Sam, death's not an ending. It's just another chapter. See you soon. Standing in the blood-stained cell, I realized bitterly that Kane was right. This wasn't over. It never would be. Because Daniel Kane hadn't just cheated death. He cheated justice, reality, and sanity itself. And worst of all, I knew now he'd never stop haunting me. Not until he'd finally won. But Kane didn't know one thing. I will not stop till I free Jake and send Kane back to the hell where he belongs. I swear it.